the colonization of the Philippines, which was, you know, the Philippines, Hawaii, Puerto Rico, Cuba were the first colonies of the United States. And the way they waged war on our peoples was learned from the conquest of indigenous peoples in the US. It's the same exact slash and burn tactics that they used here to kill millions, to kill upwards of 2 million Filipinos before taking our country, our nation. And um, they knew that they had to subjugate Filipino women in particular, similarly to how they knew they had to conquer indigenous women here in Turtle Island in order to have and claim full victory. Um, they did it through war completely. For example, there was a massacre in Samar where they just wiped out everyone over the age of 5. And they did it through, similar to here, uh, education. Um, they made Filipino women teachers and nurses. Um, they completely erased many of our written languages and implemented the US colonial education to keep Filipinos in line to this day. Um, you know, the thing about our people is that we can we don't have to go very far back to remember what it's like to be free. The Spaniards didn't take every single tribe, and the Americans didn't either, which is why this tool of education has been so important moving forward. Um, and rape was a main tool of US conquest. In some languages in the Philippines, there's not even a word for rape. They use the English word because it was introduced as a concept, like in Bontok. It was introduced as a concept by the Americans. There's not even a word for prostitute or prostitution in all of our Filipino languages. The word is puta. It comes from the Spanish colonizers. I don't want to romanticize the role of Filipino women pre-colonization, but I do want to assert that it was a matrilineal. We had matrilineal societies before they stepped foot on our islands, um, and the transformation of the Filipino woman into 3 categories: either you are a subservient housewife, you're a whore, or you're a religious person or a nun. Those were the 3 categories that we were allowed to occupy post colonization. And anyone that fell outside of that realm, particularly those that were revered as our priestesses, our healers, were labeled as witches, both by the Spaniards and the Americans. I do want to share one more thing, which is during World War II, we saw another colonizer step foot in the Philippines, which was the Japanese imperial soldiers, the Japanese imperial nation. And my grandmother was a comfort woman. So I myself I am not a survivor of the sex trade, but I'm the granddaughter of those that did. My grandmother was taken from her home. She was very young, and she was systematically raped by Japanese soldiers. And Japan to this day has not, one, compensated, not even apologized to women in countries outside of Korea, right? So Vietnam, China, Philippines, Thailand. Um, and when people say that we should reclaim this narrative of the empowered, quote, sex worker, I always think about my grandma. And I think about how she used to huddle in the corner with her 8 sisters and cry. This is not something that is natural to us.